Hello everyone. This is week 4 and the last in the present set. There are 5 Mondays in November, so there will not be an email sent through next Monday. Because of that, I've decided to do things a bit differently throughout the end of November and the beginning of December. We're going to be working on backgrounds and using different techniques. And because this is a huge subject, and I have decided to send you 2 links today to carry you through the next few weeks, and so that you actually will have something new to look at or do next time. But today I'm going to go through to try and remind you of a lot of different techniques that can be used in your paintings and especially in your backgrounds over the next few weeks. Then the next link that I'm going to send to you today, you can open any time you wish, and it will be showing you my painting of a subject with a simple background and painting on the top. And I chose to paint a branch of sloes, which are from a photo sent by Julie, thank you. I particularly wanted to paint those because it shows a nice bloom on the front, on the outside of the actual sloe. But if you can't get hold of that sort of thing, maybe, and you want to try this, it is quite a challenge. You might want to get hold of a bunch of grapes and paint those instead from life. Anyway, today I'm just going to go through techniques with you and then hope that you can use some of these in your next painting, okay? I'm not going to suggest that you paint a lot of little pigs. Don't panic. So the first technique I'm going to show you here is blending of colours. Not as easy as it looks, but can be used, practice this technique, and it can be used for skies and it can be used in your backgrounds. I'll try and show you some examples as we go through. This is an example of blending a background and painting over the top. So as you can see, it's quite a bright background with one colour blending into the next, okay, and then painting on the top after the background is dry. So that's the blending technique, and as I say, not as easy as it looks, but very forgiving in a background that you're going to paint on the top of. So if you get particular marks that you don't love, then you just paint over them, and it doesn't matter. It's more important to get that right in a sky. So practice. The next technique I'm going to show you, I have got quite a lot to go through, and I would have thought maybe beginners could create a little book like this, trying out these techniques and something to keep. But the more experienced already possibly know all about these, but I'm just reminding you that these are things that you can use. And that's why I'm sending the second link, so that you've got, something to go forward with. So this is just dropping water onto wet paint there, and dropping colour onto wet paint on that particular patch, okay? So it makes lovely sort of flowery type marks, and the smaller your dot, the smaller the thing is going to be, the bigger droplet is going to obviously create a wider mark. This is salting, which is really, really nice into backgrounds. That's table salt and that's rock salt. So I think most of you know that you must drop it onto, from a distance, just sprinkle it on, onto wet paint, and it will work on any colour and makes lovely marks into the the background for you. The rock salt obviously makes bigger marks and more interesting. You can mingle the two. And that makes for a lovely wintry type of background, maybe in your work. I don't know if you can see that it's probably shining, but that worked really well, the salt on there, on that particular painting. So it can be used with a lovely cool colour in your background on wintry subjects. Masking fluid, which I know you've all got and use, mustn't be overdone because it can, you know, just sort of spoil, you know, the look of things. If you don't apply it carefully, you must apply it very carefully, and it just reserves the white paper underneath, or any colour underneath that you want to reserve and then paint on the top of. Various marks can be made and various tools can be used. That is just splattering it on with the heel of a toothbrush. This is quite a good tool to use. The drawing pen, ruling pen, because it's got a little wheel and you can open the end or have it tight and it'll make a smaller mark. Just an ordinary pen and ink dip pen is good. This is specifically for applying the drawing gum, and it's got a rubber tip one end and a brush the other end. And if you use a brush, make sure you clean it well. So that's the masking fluid. Splattering, and I usually pop. To do this kind of a splatter, you would dip into the paint and then tap onto another utensil, and you're going to get soft splatter. If you use a small brush, if you use a large brush, it's going to be bigger. That's splattered onto wet paint, so you just get patchy sort of marks which look nice in the background. And that's on damp paper but not wet. So again, you get lovely open type marks. So that's a splattering, and it's a technique we use quite a lot, and it's a nice one. It gives another dimension to your work. Wax resist, that's just a piece of candle wax. Use the corner, use it flat, just break up any candle and it will work for you, but be careful about the marks you make because it totally resists the paint, and you don't get a second chance with it. But lovely for old doors, grasses, water, whatever you may wish to use it for, but it is a good technique. This is trailing watercolour, whereby you pop your watercolour down on top of a shape that you've created with water, drop the watercolour down, and the watercolour will run down the little trails that you've made, also very nice into backgrounds. And it makes a lovely edge for you, as you can see, if you look carefully, how the paint will go only up to the edge of your watermark, but it sits there as a little residue and makes a nice line for you. So things like that into maybe a background where you've got berries and leaves and branches and things going on, these marks actually really can be quite helpful. This is plastic film, cling film. That's crumpled to create a sort of an icy effect, or in fact if it was colourful it would just be patterning. This is stretched across to create different marks, stripy marks, which might indicate water, perhaps, something like that. Can be used with lots of different colours. I've got a picture here that I used it in the background. I don't know if you can see it. Again, it's got this plastic on. But very light background, popped down the plastic film on the top and then did a drawing with my pen on the top. So that gave a lovely wintry cold effect. So make sure you use the right colours for whatever subject you're thinking about using. This is sponging, just with an ordinary little sponge, just dipped into the paint, fairly dry. Practice first to see that you've got it right before you put it onto your main picture. And again, it makes lovely marks for foliage or background marks, patterning on vases, things like that. Can be used for lots of different things. This is blowing with a straw, whereby you pop a patch of paint down and then just actually blow through a straw and keep on blowing, and you'll get all these sort of sticky marks which look like branches and bits and pieces of a stick into a background. Got one here that I did. That one's got blowing at the top, and it's also got the candle wax, which made the exact marks that I wanted it to make on the pot. That was a clay pot. So that worked quite well for me. Again, I've got blowing marks here in the corner of this particular picture and some salting in the background. I only wanted the salt to make sort of, I used it on a very wet background because I actually just wanted texture without too many other marks that might fight with my subject. So if you want it just to make sort of texture marks, you need to put it onto really quite wet paint. You learn more about these techniques as you use them and as time goes by. This is pipetting, just putting ink or watercolour. This is actually liquid paint, I think it was, and just pipette it and make various marks. Again, lovely for, you can use it with masking fluid if you wanted light areas in the background, but makes lovely natural type marks for you that you may find more difficult with a brush. So worth having a try with a pipette. This is Graffito, which is scratching out or scoring the paper. Either make these marks with something like this or this after drawing your leaf, and then when you paint it, the paint goes into these crevices and sits there as a darker colour and creates veining for you. It can also be done after you've painted your leaf while it's still wet, but it can only work while it's wet. It won't work on dry paper. If you want to use it on dry paper, then this is the sort of effect that you're going to get, and that makes nice marks for something like running water, and it actually is scratching up the surface of a pen. Hang on, I'm just looking for my, I can't find it. I've got a scalpel somewhere, which is what I use to do that with, but the corner of a blade or anything like that would work really well. Or in fact, if you just want to make these marks, find a small brush and use the other end of it, okay, to make these veining marks. This is printing, so I actually painted the back side of ivy leaves and just printed them onto the paper, which creates lovely background leaves, and then maybe paint some more definite ones in the front or around or over the top, or just create lovely printing of leaves into some of your work perhaps. And that's just using a little piece of wood and printing a fence or a gate or something in the background, or posts, because it's a nicer effect for a distant fence or whatever than actually if you painted a solid line. This is dry brushwork, which is just a matter of putting the paint on your brush and skimming across the top surface of your paper to create this kind of mark, which can look quite like water or marks on an old door or something like that, wherever you want that kind of a mark. But you've got to be very light so that it doesn't go into the paper more, and it's a drier mix on your brush. Okay, so I'll just show you one or two more things that I did with these techniques. That's a rose I painted and popped a grey background on, which I actually really didn't like. I used cling film to create particular marks into the background. So what I did there was to use the layering technique. So when that first wash was dry, I painted another colour on the top, which was orange, and then left that to dry, then painted a deep pink over the top. And I like it better than I did with the grey. So that layering technique works really well if you just use a lovely light watery mix over the top of a dried underneath. But as you can see, it doesn't obliterate any marks that you might have made in the background in the first instance, which is really quite nice. So that was the texture under there made with the cling film. Right, so this week you can use create a background using some of these techniques if you'd like to, and if you wish you could use pen over the top to do your drawing, or in fact if you feel that's too restricting, just use a pencil and draw with the pencil, then paint, or just paint. Any of those choices, just work within your own style and your whatever technique inspires you. Okay, so that actually was drawn with the pen, but not everywhere. I think actually at the end I went in and put a few berries and leaves in to give a softer, more distant effect, which maybe you could try. It's not easy to get hold of berries at the moment, hence using a photograph for my next tutorial. Right, okay, so those are the techniques, and as I say, make a little booklet for yourselves if you haven't got one and want to remember them all, or just go ahead if you're more experienced and use those techniques that you already know about. But I hope I may have reminded some of you of them that you might have forgotten. So all of those techniques that I've shown you can be extremely useful in your paintings, but try not to overdo them. I think I've seen many cases where the main subject can get lost when surrounded by too much technique, so go easy on it, especially the masking fluid. It can make marks that look too contrived and not quite natural enough. I'd like you to choose your own subject, so working on anything that inspires you or something you may have been a favourite over the last year of our working together. So feel free over the next few weeks to paint what you would like to paint. It can be anything, okay, just so long as you include some of these techniques. So as I've said, there'll be no email next week on the 6th, but I'll be back with you on the 13th of December when I'll be painting something Christmassy. But after that, concentrating more on wintry subjects, I think. I've already spotted some lovely dried things in the garden, which we can enjoy committing to paper a bit later. So have some fun over the next few weeks, and I'm now actually going to attach another email for you, which shows you how I have created a soft background and painting on the top. Okay, take care everyone, bye.